During a family trip to the lake, we were boating when suddenly my cruel husband stopped the boat. My ruthless husband and mother-in-law forcibly removed my life jacket and said, "Finally, your chapter is over. We'll never see you again." They both pushed me into the lake and left me to die as they moved away. However, I survived bravely and saved my life. The very next day, I returned and gave them a shocking surprise when they woke up. My name is Sarah Miller, and for a while, I truly thought I was living a dream life. I married James, my college sweetheart, the man I believed I'd grow old with, sharing every joy and challenge along the way. I fell for him in my sophomore year. He was charming, thoughtful, and made me feel like the most important person in the world, as if no one else mattered. After graduation, we decided to take the next step and got married. I couldn't have been happier, imagining all the wonderful years ahead. We settled in a cozy home near Lake Tahoe, California. It was beautiful, serene, and everything I had imagined our life would be, with the gentle lapping of the water and the fresh mountain air surrounding us every day. James worked as a Navy officer, a job that gave him pride and purpose, and I admired him deeply for his dedication, the way he carried himself with such honor. He made me feel so loved in return, always finding little ways to show his affection. His mother, Margaret, was initially very welcoming before the wedding. She treated me like a daughter, showering me with kindness that made me feel truly part of the family. She would compliment me, share family recipes passed down through generations, and even give me advice about married life, helping me navigate those early adjustments. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have such a supportive mother-in-law, someone who seemed to genuinely care about my happiness. But as I was about to learn, appearances can be deceiving, and the warmth I felt was nothing more than a fragile illusion hiding something much darker beneath the surface. The first year of marriage was blissful, filled with those magical moments that make life feel perfect. James would come home and talk to me about his day, sharing stories from work with enthusiasm, and we'd plan little outings by the lake on weekends, where we'd pack picnics and just enjoy each other's company. We both loved boating, and those trips felt like an escape from the world, a private paradise where worries melted away under the sun. Margaret would visit occasionally, and she seemed genuinely happy for us, often bringing small gifts or sharing laughs over dinner. Life felt perfect, like we were building something unbreakable together. But things started to change in the second year of our marriage, slowly at first, like a shadow creeping in unnoticed. It began with subtle comments from Margaret. "Sarah, when are you planning to make me a grandmother?" She'd ask, her tone light but insistent, as if it were the most natural expectation in the world. At first, I laughed it off, replying, "Whenever the time is right, Margaret. We're just enjoying our time together for now, savoring these moments before diving into parenthood." But her remarks became more frequent, more pointed, and James started echoing them, turning what was once a casual conversation into a pointed demand that hung over us like a storm cloud. They told me I needed to focus on starting a family, that it was my duty as a wife, as if my worth was tied solely to that role. I explained that these things couldn't be forced, that we needed to let nature take its course, but they wouldn't listen, their impatience growing with each passing day. "You've got 3 months, Sarah," Margaret finally said one evening, her voice cold and unyielding, like a judge delivering a verdict. "If you're not pregnant by then, we'll have to reevaluate your place in this family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The words cut deep, leaving me stunned and questioning everything. James sat silently, avoiding my eyes as though he agreed with her, his lack of defense speaking volumes. I felt like my entire world was shifting beneath me, the ground I thought was solid now cracking and unstable. I loved James deeply and wanted to have children with him someday, envisioning a future filled with laughter and little feet running around. But this pressure, this ultimatum, it was suffocating, draining the joy from our relationship and replacing it with constant tension. As I tried to process their growing hostility, I noticed other changes in James that only added to my unease. He became distant. The man who once showered me with affection now seemed preoccupied and distracted, as if his mind was always elsewhere. I chalked it up to stress from his job, the demands of being a Navy officer weighing heavily on him. But something in my gut told me it was more than that, a deeper rift that I couldn't quite pinpoint. Margaret, too, began acting colder toward me. She stopped visiting as often, and when she did, her warmth was gone, replaced by a frosty demeanor that made every interaction uncomfortable. She would criticize little things, how I kept the house, the meals I cooked with care, even my appearance, as if nothing I did could ever measure up. It felt like I could do nothing right in her eyes, no matter how hard I tried to please her. One night, I finally confronted James. "What's happening to us?" I asked, tears brimming in my eyes, my voice filled with desperation. "You've changed, James. You're not the man I married, the one who made me feel cherished every day." He looked at me with a mix of guilt and frustration, sighing heavily. "I'm just under a lot of pressure, Sarah. Margaret is worried about the family's future, and I don't know how to handle it." His words didn't comfort me. They only added to my unease, leaving me feeling more isolated than ever. I started feeling like an outsider in my own marriage, and my once loving home began to feel like a prison, walls closing in with each passing day. What I didn't know then was that James was hiding a secret, one that would shatter the life I thought we had built together, piece by fragile piece. He was having an affair with Angela Harris, a wealthy businesswoman who had been financing his extravagant lifestyle behind my back, indulging him in ways I never could. Margaret, ever the schemer, fully supported this relationship. To her, Angela was a better fit for James, richer, more influential, and capable of providing the status she craved. Together, they were plotting to remove me from the picture entirely, weaving a web of deceit that I was blissfully unaware of. But I didn't suspect any of this at the time. I was still clinging to the hope that we could fix our marriage, that this was just a rough patch we could weather together. Even when Margaret's demands became crueler and James's affection grew colder, I tried to convince myself that love could conquer all, holding on to the memories of our happier days. Then came the day that changed everything, a turning point I never saw coming. James came home unusually cheerful and suggested a trip to the lake. "You've been so stressed lately," he said, flashing me a smile I hadn't seen in months, one that almost felt genuine. "Let's go boating this weekend, just the three of us, you, me, and Mom." I was taken aback, but cautiously hopeful, wondering if this could be a sign of reconciliation. Maybe he was trying to mend things between us. Maybe this was his way of saying he still cared, of rebuilding the bridge that had been crumbling. I agreed, despite the nagging feeling in my gut that something was off, a quiet whisper of doubt I chose to ignore. When the day arrived, I felt a mix of excitement and unease, my heart fluttering with uncertainty. Margaret, too, was uncharacteristically pleasant, even offering to pack snacks for the trip, humming as she prepared them. We drove to the lake together, and for the first time in months, they seemed almost happy, chatting lightly about the weather and old family stories. I wanted to believe it was genuine, but something about their smiles felt forced, calculated, like actors performing a role. Still, I pushed those thoughts aside. I loved boating, and the idea of being out on the water was enough to lift my spirits, reminding me of simpler times. We rented a small boat, and James handed each of us a life jacket. "Safety first," he said with a grin, his eyes sparkling in a way that almost convinced me everything was fine. I smiled back, trying to ignore the strange tension in the air, the subtle undercurrent that made the hairs on my neck stand up. As the boat set off, I let myself relax, focusing on the gentle waves and the warm sun on my skin, breathing in the fresh air. For a brief moment, I felt a sense of peace, a fleeting escape from the troubles at home. But that peace was short-lived. As the boat drifted into deeper waters, James and Margaret's demeanor began to shift, their cheerful facade cracking, replaced by something darker, more sinister. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being led into a trap, but I couldn't imagine what was coming next. And then, they stopped the boat. "Sarah," James said, his voice chillingly calm, "we need to talk." As the boat came to a stop in the middle of the lake, I felt an icy chill run through me. It wasn't from the water or the breeze. It was the look on James's face, his expression eerily calm, almost too calm, and Margaret sat beside him, her arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips that sent shivers down my spine. "Sarah," James began, looking at me like a stranger, not the man I had loved and married with all my heart. "We need to talk about your future, or rather, your lack of one." I blinked, trying to process his words, my mind reeling in confusion. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling, fear creeping in like cold water. Margaret laughed, a cold, harsh sound that made my stomach twist into knots. "Oh, don't act surprised, Sarah. You must have noticed by now that you're no longer welcome in this family," she spat, her words laced with venom. My heart pounded in my chest. "What are you talking about?" "I've done everything I can to make this marriage work," I protested, desperation rising. James shrugged, his calm demeanor unnerving, as if this were just a casual chat. "It's not enough. Angela is willing to give me a life you never could. She's wealthy, supportive, and ready to start a family. You, on the other hand, are expendable." Angela, the name hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd heard James mention her in passing before, but I had no idea she was part of his life in this way, a secret lover pulling strings from the shadows. My mind raced, trying to understand how everything had unraveled so completely, how the man I trusted had become this heartless figure. Margaret leaned forward, her voice dripping with venom. "We've been patient, Sarah, but it's clear you're just wasting our time. It's better for everyone if you're out of the picture." Panic clawed at my chest. "Out of the picture?" I repeated, my voice shaking with terror. "What does that mean?" James stood up, his expression darkening like a storm cloud. "It means this is the end for you." Before I could react, he grabbed me by the shoulders, pulling me to my feet with surprising force. I struggled against him, but Margaret joined in, her hands ripping at the straps of my life jacket, tearing it away viciously. I screamed, begging them to stop, my voice echoing across the water, but they only laughed, cold, heartless laughter that made my blood run cold, revealing the monsters they truly were. "Goodbye, Sarah," Margaret sneered as she yanked the life jacket off me. "No, please," I shouted, tears streaming down my face, pleading for mercy. "Don't do this. I'll leave, I'll disappear, you'll never see me again." But they didn't care. Together, they shoved me over the side of the boat. I hit the water with a splash, the cold instantly biting into my skin, shocking my system. I flailed, trying to keep my head above the surface as I watched the boat drift farther away. James and Margaret stood at the edge, their figures silhouetted against the sun. They were laughing. "She can't swim," Margaret said smugly. "It's over." My heart sank as I realized their plan. They thought I'd drown, that I'd never make it to shore. But they had underestimated me. What they didn't know was that I loved swimming. It was one of the reasons I had always loved boating, a skill honed from childhood summers at the lake, despite the shock and fear coursing through me like electricity. I forced myself to focus, drawing on every bit of inner strength I had. I took deep breaths, calming my racing heart, knowing that panicking would only make things worse, sealing my fate in the depths. I started swimming, keeping my stroke steady and strong, pushing through the water with every ounce of strength I had, my muscles burning, but my will unbreakable. The shore seemed impossibly far, a distant line on the horizon, but I refused to give up, repeating to myself that I had to survive, that this couldn't be the end. As I swam, I heard the sound of another boat in the distance, a faint hum that sparked a sliver of hope. I turned my head and saw two people, a man and a woman, staring in my direction. They were too far away to hear me, but they could see what had happened, their expressions shifting from curiosity to alarm. One of them raised a phone, pointing it toward James's boat, which was now speeding away, leaving a wake of betrayal behind. I kept swimming, my arms and legs burning with the effort, exhaustion threatening to pull me under, but I didn't know if I could make it to them. But I didn't have to. The other boat turned toward me, cutting through the waves with purpose, and within moments, I felt strong hands pulling me out of the water, lifting me to safety. "Are you okay?" the man asked, his voice filled with concern, his eyes wide with shock. I couldn't speak at first. I was gasping for air, shaking from the cold and the shock of what had just happened, my body trembling uncontrollably. The woman handed me a blanket, wrapping it around my shoulders gently as tears streamed down my face, a flood of emotions breaking free. They tried to kill me. I finally managed to choke out, my voice hoarse and broken. My husband and his mother, they threw me into the lake. They thought I'd drown. The man's expression hardened, his jaw set in determination. I saw everything, he said firmly. We have it on video. Don't worry, we'll make sure they pay for this. His words gave me a glimmer of hope, a small light piercing the darkness that had enveloped me. They told me their names, Andrew and Emily Carter. Andrew was a lawyer, sharp and compassionate, and Emily was his sister, equally kind-hearted. They had been out on the lake, enjoying a quiet day of relaxation when they witnessed the horrifying scene unfold before their eyes. We're taking you to shore, Andrew said firmly, his voice steady and reassuring. You'll be safe, and I'll make sure those two never get away with this. As the boat sped toward land, I clutched the blanket tightly around me, my mind racing with a whirlwind of thoughts. My husband, the man I had trusted with my life, had just tried to take it away, his betrayal cutting deeper than any knife. Margaret, who I had once thought of as a second mother, had been complicit in it all, her cruelty exposed in full. I felt a mix of anger, heartbreak, and determination. They had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible, but I was still here, alive and breathing, and I wasn't going to let them win. When we reached the shore, Andrew and Emily helped me to their car and drove me to my parents' house, their presence a comforting anchor in the storm. My parents were shocked when they saw me, soaking wet, shaking, and crying uncontrollably, a sight that must have broken their hearts. I told them everything, from the betrayal and the affair to the attack on the boat, sparing no detail despite the pain of reliving it. My father's face turned red with anger, his fists clenched in fury, while my mother hugged me tightly, sobbing into my shoulder, her embrace a lifeline. We'll fight this, my father said, his voice firm and resolute. They won't get away with what they've done. Andrew nodded, his professional demeanor shining through. With the video evidence we have, we can build a strong case. Justice will be served. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind kept replaying the events on the boat, the betrayal, the laughter, the coldness in their eyes, like a nightmare I couldn't escape. But I also thought about Andrew and Emily, about the video evidence they had captured, a crucial piece that could turn the tide. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope, a spark that ignited my resolve. James and Margaret had tried to destroy me, but they had failed. Now it was my turn to fight back, to reclaim my power and ensure they faced the consequences. The morning after that horrifying night, I woke up at my parents' house, still shaken but determined, the events of the previous day etched into my memory like a scar. I couldn't stop thinking about the betrayal, the coldness in James's eyes, and Margaret's cruel laugh. The memories haunted me, replaying in loops, but I wasn't going to let them win. They thought they had silenced me forever, but I was alive, and I would make sure they faced justice, no matter what it took. Andrew Carter, the lawyer who had saved me, arrived that morning with his sister Emily. They had spent the night reviewing the video evidence and preparing a plan, their dedication evident in their focused expressions. Andrew's confidence gave me strength, a steady foundation to lean on. Sarah, he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, his tone professional yet empathetic, the video we have is solid evidence. It clearly shows James and Margaret pushing you overboard, and their laughter afterward proves intent. This isn't just an accident, it's a premeditated crime, calculated and vicious. Hearing those words made my stomach turn, the reality sinking in deeper, but I nodded, steeling myself. What do we do next? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. We filed charges immediately, Andrew replied without hesitation. We'll accuse them of attempted murder and conspiracy. This is a serious case, and with the evidence we have, the law is on your side. We'll make sure every detail is airtight. My parents supported me completely. My father, ever the protective parent, was furious. They deserve to rot in prison for what they've done, he said through gritted teeth, his anger mirroring my own. My mother, meanwhile, held my hand and kept repeating, "You're so strong, Sarah." We're here for you every step of the way." We went to the police station later that day to file the charges, Andrew accompanying us with his briefcase full of documentation and the video on a USB drive, ready to present our case. When we explained the situation to the officers, they were horrified, their faces paling as we described the events. The detective assigned to the case, Detective Collins, took our statements meticulously and promised swift action, his notebook filling with notes. "This video will make all the difference," he said gravely. "We'll start by bringing them in for questioning. We won't let this slide." For the first time since the attack, I felt a sense of power returning to me, a reclaiming of control that had been stripped away. James and Margaret had treated me like I was disposable, a mere obstacle in their path, but they had underestimated me. I wasn't going to hide or let fear paralyze me. I would confront them head-on, with the truth as my weapon. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The police arrested James and Margaret at their home, catching them off guard in the place where so much deceit had been planned. I wasn't there to see it, but Detective Collins told me that both of them looked stunned, their faces drained of color. They hadn't expected me to survive, let alone take legal action, their arrogance shattered in an instant. I could only imagine the looks on their faces when they saw the evidence against them, the video that captured their crime in undeniable clarity. The case moved quickly, propelled by the irrefutable proof. Andrew worked tirelessly, preparing every detail with precision, his commitment unwavering. He explained the legal process to me step by step, making sure I felt informed and empowered, breaking down complex terms into understandable pieces. We were charging them with attempted murder, and Andrew was confident we had a strong case, one that would hold up under scrutiny. When the court date arrived, I was nervous but determined, my heart pounding as I prepared to face my betrayers. As I walked into the courtroom, I saw James and Margaret sitting at the defendant's table, their expressions a mix of shock and defiance. It was clear they hadn't expected to see me alive, much less ready to testify against them, strong and unyielding. Andrew started by presenting the video evidence. The room went silent as the footage played, the sound of their laughter as they threw me overboard sending chills through everyone in the courtroom, a haunting echo of their cruelty. The prosecutor pointed out how their actions were premeditated, deliberate, and heartless, leaving no room for excuses. James's lawyer tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding, that they had panicked and thought I was already dead when they left the scene, but the video and my testimony painted a very different picture, exposing the lies for what they were. The jury could see through their deceptions, their faces reflecting the gravity of the evidence. When it was my turn to testify, I took a deep breath and spoke from the heart, my voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside. I described the years of emotional abuse, the ultimatum they gave me about starting a family, and how I had trusted them right up until the moment they tried to kill me, bearing my soul to the court. James was the man I thought I'd spend my life with, I said, my voice trembling but resolute, and Margaret, she was like a second mother to me. But they betrayed me in the worst way possible. They tried to end my life because I didn't fit into their plans anymore. But I'm still here, and I'm here to make sure they face the consequences of their actions. The courtroom was silent as I finished, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I could see the jury members exchanging glances, their expressions grim and thoughtful. James and Margaret avoided looking at me, their once confident demeanor crumbling under the pressure. Andrew's closing argument was powerful, emphasizing the cruelty and calculation behind their actions and how they had underestimated me, portraying them as the villains they were. He painted a clear picture of two people who thought they were untouchable, but who had been caught red-handed, their scheme unraveling before everyone's eyes. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the evidence was overwhelmingly in my favor: the video, the witness testimony from Andrew and Emily, and my own account left no room for doubt. I could see James and Margaret growing more desperate with each passing day, their facade cracking further. Finally, the jury reached a verdict: guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced both of them to life imprisonment without parole for their premeditated attempt on my life. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Justice had been served. James and Margaret had tried to destroy me, but they had failed. They would spend the rest of their lives paying for what they had done, locked away where they could harm no one else. As I left the courtroom that day, I felt a mix of emotions: anger at the betrayal, sadness for the love lost, and triumph in my survival. They had taken so much from me, but they hadn't taken my will to fight. I was still standing, ready to rebuild my life from the ashes. When the trial ended and the verdict was announced, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe freely, the chains of fear loosening their grip. James and Margaret had been found guilty, and their sentence, life imprisonment, was a testament to their cruelty and the justice they deserved, a fitting end to their reign of terror. But even as the weight lifted off my shoulders, the scars they left behind were still there, reminders of the pain that would take time to fade. Leaving the courtroom, I was greeted by my parents, Andrew and Emily. They embraced me tightly, their support a reminder that I wasn't alone in this battle, that I had a network of love to lean on. Andrew, who had been my pillar of strength throughout the trial, smiled warmly and said, "You did it, Sarah. You stood up for yourself, and now they'll never hurt you again, or anyone else." I nodded, tears welling in my eyes from gratitude and exhaustion. I couldn't have done it without all of you. You saved my life, not just on that boat, but in every way, guiding me through the darkness. The weeks that followed were a mix of healing and reflection. I stayed with my parents for a while, allowing myself the time to process everything. The betrayal I had experienced still stung, like a wound that ached with every memory. But I refused to let it define me, choosing instead to grow from it. I began seeing a counselor to help me work through the trauma, unpacking the layers of hurt session by session, and with each one, I felt a little stronger, more whole. Andrew and Emily remained close friends, checking in regularly with calls and visits that brightened my days. One day, Andrew visited with some news. "I thought you should know James and Margaret tried to appeal the sentence, but the court denied it. They're going to serve their full time." I felt a surge of vindication, a final nail in the coffin of their schemes. "Good," I said firmly, my voice laced with resolve. They deserve to pay for what they did, every single day. As the months went by, I started to rebuild my life, piece by piece, rediscovering the joys I had lost. I returned to my hobbies, especially boating. It was strange at first, confronting the fears tied to that fateful day, but I had to remind myself that the lake wasn't my enemy. It was a place I loved, a part of my life that James and Margaret couldn't take away from me. Slowly, I reclaimed it, feeling the wind on my face as a symbol of freedom. I also began exploring new opportunities. I went back to school to study counseling, inspired by the help I had received during my recovery. I wanted to support others who had faced similar betrayals, to be a beacon of hope for those who felt lost in the shadows of pain. One evening, as I sat by the lake watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Emily joined me. She handed me a small notebook. "What's this?" I asked, flipping it open curiously. "A journal," she said with a smile, her eyes kind. "You've been through so much, Sarah. Maybe writing it down will help you find closure, to process and release." I took her advice and began writing my story, the love I thought I had, the betrayal that shattered it, the survival that saved me, and the justice I fought for. Each page felt like a step toward healing, a way to make sense of everything I had endured, transforming pain into purpose. In time, I realized that while James and Margaret had taken so much from me, they hadn't taken everything. They hadn't taken my resilience, my determination, or my ability to start over, to forge a new path. I was still standing, stronger than ever, with a heart mended by time and support. Looking back now, I see my story not as one of betrayal, but of survival and triumph, a testament to the human spirit's unbreakable will. I've learned that even in the darkest moments, there's always a path forward, a light waiting to guide you. I've found new purpose, surrounded by people who truly care for me, who lift me up rather than tear me down. James and Margaret are where they belong, behind bars, and I'm free to live, free to love, and free to be the person I was always meant to be, embracing a future full of possibility and hope. Please feel free to comment below if you liked this. Remember to like and subscribers for more.